Welcome to Google Ads Unleashed, the podcast that helps you harness the power of Google Ads to increase sales for your online business. In an ever-changing Google Ads landscape, we uncover the latest strategies, techniques, and best practices for creating effective ad campaigns that deliver real results. And now your host, Jeremy Young.
And welcome to Google Ads Unleashed, guys. Here we go. So today I'm going to talk about something that is extremely important for your Google Ads account and for literally everything that you're going to be doing henceforth, and that is conversion tracking. For some reason, or for some people, this topic is very difficult or very scary. But I think it's one of them things where once you actually get it and know what to do and know what the best practices are, then actually you're not going to have any problems further down the line. So let's dive into it, talk about various points. First, I'm going to introduce you to conversion tracking on Google Ads, what it means, how it can help businesses measure their success. Then we're going to talk about the benefits, right? So what sort of stuff you can track and why it's really important that you do that properly. And then we're going to talk about how to actually set it up on Google Ads, because there's many ways to skin a cat here. Unlike Meta, for instance, where it's very easy, so to speak, to implement a pixel and just set it up with Google Ads. You have to jump through a few hoops. Then we're going to talk a little bit about configuring conversion settings, what type of conversions they are, and which ones you should track. We're going to troubleshoot common challenges, for instance, diagnose and tracking discrepancies, what to do and how to best do that. Then we're going to talk about some few best practices, some case studies, and what future trends most likely are and key conclusions. So, and why I wanted to do an episode about this pretty early into the podcast is that it is a fundamental thing that you should get right from the start, because you will not believe how many Google Ads accounts I open up and audit, and the first thing I see is the conversion tracking is all over the place. And this is usually a disaster, right? You will not believe this, but we onboarded a massive beauty brand last week. And the first thing I saw is that they measured all of their conversions double. So that meant that literally all the data over years and years and tens of thousands of ad spend has been falsified, and they've been basing all of their actions in the account and their marketing on wrong numbers. So as you can imagine, that is literally a total disaster. So, which is why it's very important to do this correctly. But first of all, what is conversion tracking? So I'm going to quote Google here because it's on their lovely support site, and I'm going to read this out to you now. Conversion tracking is a free tool that shows you what happens after a customer interacts with your ads, whether they purchased a product, signed up for your newsletter, called your business, or downloaded your app. When a customer completes an action that you've defined as valuable, these customer actions are called conversions. So this is the definition of conversion tracking, and essentially this means you define what is important to your brand as a conversion and then track this activity, how often it happens on your website. An example for this, let's say if you're an e-commerce business owner, your very important conversion that you'll be tracking are obviously purchases, right? You will want to know how many purchases have occurred on my website, what sort of revenue have I gotten from these purchases, and how does it measure up against my Google Ads spend. But if you're a lead gen business, like a classic B2B business, then you might want to be measuring leads, right? So that could be very interesting or important to you. So you could measure inquiries. If someone clicks on an ad, lands on a landing page, fills out the form, that is then something that you will want to track. And more or less tracking these conversions in a nutshell helps us businesses measure and optimize advertising campaigns, right? It helps us to understand the effectiveness of different ads. So let's say, for instance, if you have a search campaign and you have one ad group with one keyword and you have 3 different ads, then you can see how effective one of the 3 ads, let's say if you have 3 ads tested in one ad group, you can see how effective they are. But you can also see how effective, for instance, keywords are. You can also see which search terms convert. You can see which campaigns work. You can see which products work. So it's very, very important to understand the effectiveness of your ads and campaigns. But of course, it also is very important to then understand sort of the ad performance and what we can do to increase ROI. For instance, you can identify high-performing campaigns and allocate more budget to it. You can make other data-driven decisions for your budget allocation. You can, for instance, evaluate the impact of whether devices work or not. You can, for instance, look on account level whether tablets are, for instance, working for your business at all, or whether desktops are working better. Real life example, for instance, that we have at the moment, we have a brand which sells valves, which sells like pipes and fittings and lots of sort of B2B stuff. And something that we've determined after quite some ad spend are 2 very interesting things, right? So first of all, we are understanding that predominantly men buy, which is not surprising because most tradespeople are mostly men, so likely they're buying as well. We, for instance, saw from the conversion data as well that most people buy on desktops, which makes sense as well because it's a very complicated product that needs a lot of research. You don't really just flip out your mobile and type in butterfly valve and search for something like this and purchase it. It's also a high value transaction. The AOV is in the hundreds with this brand, the average order value. So it's a very considered purchase and people will sort of do a little bit more research before pulling the trigger. But something that's super interesting as well is that people are buying Monday to Friday. So with this brand, we understood that through implementing conversion tracking properly, that Saturdays and Sundays were a total waste of money, right? So we can then use this data to, for instance, cut out Saturdays and Sundays completely from our ad schedules, and as a result we can use more advertising budget more effectively on other days of the week to make data-driven decisions, which obviously increase the effectiveness of our ads. But like I said, for e-commerce owners, this is obviously a podcast about e-commerce only. Purchases will be the most important one. But of course there are other conversions which I will talk about in a little bit. For instance, form submissions, calls, etc., etc. So how do you go about setting this up? All right, so there's a lot of ways to set this up. So most of you will be using Shopify. So the good news is if you're an e-commerce owner and you have Shopify, most likely you have set up your feed with the Google Shopping Feed app. And by doing that, you will also have it connected to your Google Ads account. And what Google then does, it creates and installs a conversion tracking tag on your entire website. Let's say this is, for instance, your canvas, right? So this is the blank slate on which we will actually the Google Ads account will receive the data, and it will then implement conversions automatically as well. You will have seen your Google Ads account that on the conversion section that there will be several conversions installed. For instance, purchases, add to carts, initiate, checkout, etc., etc. And everything will be done automatically. If you don't have that, if you have a different app installed, then I suggest that you maybe look into an app that can do this for you. There are several apps out there which can do it automatically. The same goes for all other platforms like Magento or WordPress or WooCommerce. There are apps out there with which you can install the conversion tracking automatically, and that should more or less do the trick. If you have Shopify, then there's another way of doing it with the Google Ads tag, and that is to set it up manually. So for that, you will need to install the general Google Ads tracking code within the header section, within the theme liquid of your website. You have to also pop it into the checkout. And then what I suggest is simply Google something like Shopify, Google Ads conversion tracking, and there will be instructions on what other tag you will have to pop into the checkout to actually track conversions. And generally speaking, this manual approach is how you do it with any other shop system as well, right? So this can be relatively tricky if you're scared of coding. However, for Shopify, there are lots of guides out there. Just follow them online and it's relatively straightforward. If you struggle with it as well, feel free to actually shoot me a message and I'm more than happy to help you as well and to set up a proper infrastructure. A second way of setting up conversion tracking, unless you are very skilled and can implement it manually into your code, is to do it via Google Tag Manager. So to not open a can of worms here, but Google Tag Manager is a free tool by Google Ads, by Google. And with it, you can manage all the various tags on your store, on your website. This is sometimes very handy, especially for custom-built websites, because what happens is that custom-built websites or websites built, let's say, for instance, with Wix or with something like other landing page builders like Landingy, etc., usually fire certain codes when, for instance, you click on a form submission or if you click on a click to call button or something like that, which you may want to track as a conversion. And as a result, if you're very clever with Google Tag Manager, you can use triggers to actually fire the correct conversions into, for instance, your Google Ads account or into your Google Analytics and measure conversions this way. Also, this is quite difficult. I recommend hiring either a professional if you don't know what you're doing, or ideally you will want to speak to us about this. But I might do another podcast about this at another point. But it can be quite complicated, but once you actually understand the principles, it's relatively straightforward. Then the third method, which is something that I always recommend as well, which you should be setting up anyway, is to track it via Google Analytics. So especially if you have Shopify, you will be implementing Universal Analytics, which is going to unfortunately die in about a month's time. But you will also implement Google Analytics 4, which does track your purchases automatically. So as long as you have your Google Analytics 4 account linked with your Google Ads account, which is very easy to do. You have to just go to the tools and settings for that and into linked accounts and then actually link your Google Analytics 4 account with your Google Ads account. Then you can head into the conversions tab and actually import conversions as a conversion as well. And I always recommend doing that as well at the same time. If you have Google Ads tracking installed, please also install Google Analytics tracking simultaneously. But the reason for that is that if one of them fails, you always have a backup, right? This only happened to a customer of mine a couple of weeks ago. This is a lead gen client, but all of the Google Analytics codes failed because Tag Manager failed, and as a result we were not tracking conversions for about a week or two. And obviously what we should have done is to have a backup in place at any given point anyway, but we didn't, so lesson learned, and which is why I'm sharing this knowledge on the podcast, of course, as well. Important is if you have several conversion actions, let's say you've set up your conversion tracking through Shopify and through the Google Ads tag, and you have a Google Shopping app purchase tag there automatically imported, or you're using an app to do that, or you've actually installed it manually as well, perfect. You will see that it says action optimization on primary within your Google conversions tab. And what does that mean? So it means that this conversion element is used for the optimization of your campaigns, if you optimize the purchases, let's say. And it also means that these are the conversions that you will actually see in the interface when you evaluate your ads, when you evaluate your keywords, your campaigns, your products, etc., etc. So if you have two conversion tags, let's say one from analytics and one from Google Ads, and both conversions are set to primary, that means you are counting your conversions double, right? So just choose one of them. I would recommend going with Google Ads tracking. I don't want to go too deep into why that is, but basically it helps you scale your account a little bit more, and Google Analytics is more of a BI tool. Its logic of how it tracks conversions is wildly different to Google Ads as well. So you will always see that it underreports quite a bit compared to Google Ads itself. So you will see that please leave it on, leave Google Ads tag on primary, and the rest just switch it over to secondary and let it run in the background. Then another thing that you might be considering, which is really interesting if you are really advanced, is that you might use a third-party system, so something like HubSpot or something like Salesforce to set up your Google Ads conversion tracking. And the reason for that is quite advanced, right? So we see this very often with lead gen businesses. Let's say, for instance, you sell a product or a service that's very high ticket. Then you might get a lot of inquiries, right, through your website, which you may be tracking as conversions, but it doesn't mean that those inquiries are actually resulting in sales. A lot may happen after the initial inquiry to actually to your prospect before they turn into a customer. And the important thing about Google Ads tracking, or conversion tracking in general, is you want to track conversions because Google understands from conversions how to optimize your campaigns through smart bidding, but it also understands who to actually show ads to. If you have 1,000 conversions and they all are men, they are all, let's say, people who share similar traits, similar hobbies, well, guess what? Google is going to show your ads and your products to people in the future with those same traits. So if you gather conversions from just inquirers, then and don't actually track people who complete the sale, then you have really poor seed data. So people will only show, Google will only show your ad to people who just might like making inquiries, right? Instead of actually converting into sales. I'm going to give you a very concrete example now of a client I had in the past where this was super important. So, and this client was, this was like an in-house business I worked at, and they did data recovery, right? So, and what we found is that a lot of people inquired about the keyword data recovery, which could have anything in mind. And the CPA, so the cost per acquisition, was fantastic on this keyword. However, further down the line, when we actually analyzed the quality of those leads, we found out that the quality of these leads were really poor, because these were people who didn't really have anything in mind in terms of from what sort of device they want the data recovered. For instance, hard drives were very valuable, whereas SD cards weren't. These were very often people who had SD cards, or who wanted, for instance, something like a software as well, which the company didn't offer. So as a result, those leads were poor. So within Google Ads, we were tracking inquiries and it was looking great. But as it actually turned out, when we analyzed the data, we were burning money with this keyword, right? It was a total waste of time. You won't have this problem very often with e-commerce, but basically what I'm trying to get at, we were absolutely burning money with sort of just tracking inquiries. So tracking offline conversions such as sales were super important to understand the value of our campaigns. Another example, for instance, is I worked in-house in 2019 with a company that sold water coolers and water dispensers. And as it turned out, calls were very important. But the problem is we couldn't assign contract value and other really important things back to our initial conversion, to our initial inquiry. So we set up Salesforce at the time, and Salesforce naturally integrates with Google Ads. And if someone inquired 2 weeks later they converted into a sale, we were able to take this data and pump it back into Google Ads. So as you can imagine, this sort of data, which is really high quality, helps us dramatically determine what ads are actually working and what campaigns are working, but it also helps Google to actually try and find more people like this. So feeding Google this sort of data is super, super important. It is also important to test and validate the tracking implementation. So you can do this by using the Google Tag Helper. Just download Google Chrome, go on to the extensions area, and download Tag Helper or Tag Assistant and use it to just determine whether everything is firing where it should be. For instance, make a test purchase and see if it's firing all the data correctly, or make a test inquiry and see if it's firing the data correctly. If you've set it up with, let's say, for instance, Tag Manager, then you can go into testing mode and see whether you've set up your conversion correctly. Or if you've, let's say, set up Google Ads conversion tracking now, try and search for your brand if you have a brand search campaign set up, or try to click on any of your ads, make a purchase, and actually pause the ad straight away. And then you can actually see whether it's working or not, because it will attribute the conversion to that click that you made. So testing and validating is this very important, and this is why I find it very important as well to have several conversion sources, for instance Google Analytics and Google Ads itself, because you can then see whether both work, and just to double and triple check that everything makes sense. Alright, so configuring conversion settings. So one thing that I've already said is very important is that you will want to make sure that everything is set correctly for your e-commerce conversion tracking, like conversion values and etc. You will want to make sure that counting rules are correct as well. So with purchases, for instance, you will want to count every conversion. So that means, for instance, if someone has purchased, and they've made a purchase and they think, you know what, actually I absolutely love this product, let's buy another one, but let's ship it to my brother Daniel, let's say. That's actually really my brother's name. Let's buy something for myself, buy something for Daniel. Then I buy again, then naturally you will want to count 2 conversions and count every conversion, because literally money has landed in your bank account, right? So it's really important that you understand that this has led to 2 purchases, maybe that one click. On the other hand, you don't want this, for instance, with leads, because it doesn't make any sense. Because if someone submits and let's say clicks on your ad and submits a request, and then 5 hours later they submit another request, then you don't want to track it as 2 inquiries, right? It's the same inquiry. So it's really important that you understand counting rules and that that's all correct. You will also want to understand attribution models to interpret your data correctly. So everything at the moment in Google Ads is switched over to data-driven attribution. But if you have old attribution settings still live, for instance, linear, time decay, or similar, it's very important that you actually have a look at these and make sure that they make sense. So this is really important. And another thing which I already talked about is to check whether your conversions are set to primary for your account or to secondary, and all of your micro conversions you will want to set to secondary, and all the ones which are really, really important, which is your major conversion for your account, you will want to have set to primary. And you can have several set to primary if you like. Not for e-commerce. So for e-commerce purchase is the only one you want to be tracking. If you have a lead gen business that generates lead through clicks on an email me button, clicks on a call button, submissions of landing pages, etc., it's okay to track all of these 3 at the same time and have them set to primary. So what types of conversions can you track? I've already dropped a jargon word here, that is micro and macro conversions. And these are the two things that you really want to be tracking. So first of all, I would start off with defining relevant conversions based on your business goals. Naturally for ecom, like I said about 5 times already, this is purchases, but you also may want to be thinking about initiate checkouts, right? You will also want to be maybe thinking about the value of your product views, the value of your add to carts, etc., etc. But macro conversions are the more important ones, like completed purchases or lead generations. Still, you will want to ideally, and this is one of the biggest tips of this podcast episode, you will want to set up as many as possible, especially micro conversions. Because a little known fact that not many people know is that micro conversions such as add to carts, content views, etc. are really, really important conversions that Google tracks in the background, which is why if you ever notice, if you go into the conversion sections section of your Google Ads account, is that you will see, for instance, purchases, add to cart as different conversion goal groups. This is deliberate, right? Because Google wants to understand not only your macro conversions and how many people purchased or completed leads, but Google wants to also gather data about what are these people actually doing before they are converting, right? Because this sort of higher funnel, if you like, conversion data, such as product views, add to carts, initiate checkouts, helps Google really understand more about your customers and how they behave on site, right? And this also funnels into your bidding strategies and into the optimization of your account. So this is super, super important that you try to define as many important conversions for your account. The micro conversions you set up and set to secondary. The primary conversions, the macro conversions, you set to primary, and are the ones which you will want to use to judge the performance of your ad account and, of course, your ad performance. Then I want to be talking about common challenges that we see. So first of all, something that I see very often is to verify whether conversion tracking actually works. And for me, the easiest way really is to just let it run for a couple of days and see whether you are actually starting to get conversions, whether this sort of is in line with what you're seeing on a macro level with the business, right? So are you seeing, for instance, purchases within Shopify as well that are coming from Google? Well, then most likely that if they sort of add up or match up with the ones in your Google Ads account, then you are actually verified that conversion tracking is working perfectly fine. You may want to also use other tracking tools if you are using something like Klar or Tracify or whatever, whether this matches up with the data in your Google Ads account, or you want to be using simple BI tools such as Google Analytics, which is why I said it's so important to have both installed at the same time. So you can see if you have 10 conversions, let's say in Google Analytics, and 11 are shown in Google Ads, the data is pretty accurate, right? So that's accurate enough to sort of try and work with it. Then you will want to make sure that any discrepancies are correct. So for instance, have you set correctly whether your Google Ads tracking, your purchase tracking should include tax or no tax, or shipping and no shipping, stuff like that. So you will want to make sure that this is all correct. Then you will want to address issues with multiple conversion actions. That's already something I mentioned before. Make sure that you're not tracking conversions double if they are macro conversions. Let's say if you have Google Analytics tracking and Google Ads tracking at the same time, that you don't, for purchases, that you don't have both on primary. And you will also want to make sure that any limitations and workarounds are cleared. So sort of, let's say for instance, if you have a very complicated funnel, as in sending someone to a landing page or a different website that then click through to your actual domain, that you sort out cross-domain tracking issues and so on. This again is super, super advanced and high level. I highly recommend hiring an expert such as us to fix stuff like that. So yeah, make sure that you overcome that. You make sure that all of these challenges are cleared before you actually carry on. So Now I want to talk about a few things about best practices. So a few things that you will want to make sure is that you align your conversions with your business goals. Do not track or optimize for anything high in the funnel. Sometimes people will say this to you, well, if purchase tracking doesn't get you good results, why don't you optimize towards add to carts? Don't do that. Just optimize to one goal that is really important for your business, and don't confuse the algorithm. You don't want to have 5-7 different conversion actions Google tries to optimize towards two. You just want to have one, right? Don't confuse the algorithm and keep it simple with your conversion tracking. Then also regularly review that it works, right? And make sure that anything can be optimized that can be optimized. For something I'll get to in a minute as well, what you can do. Then also make sure that you regularly review the data, whether it makes sense, for instance, by integrating Google Analytics as well. And that is pretty much it. You should be set for that. So a couple of ways, for instance, just how conversion tracking is really important. 2 examples I want to mention is, first of all, one which we've just had last week. Like I said, we had a client which really struggled, who've come to us, who really struggled to scale their Google Ads account and to make sense of the data. And by analyzing their conversion tracking and making sure everything is running correctly, we've determined that they've not been tracking their ads data correctly, and then obviously everything started making sense, right? We had stuff like duplicate conversion tracking, which falsified the data. Then naturally, every time they raised their budgets, they didn't understand why, although conversions went up dramatically, it hasn't actually given the returns that they were seeing on a macro level. So you can see this is really important. Then another a success story or interesting story I want to mention is a customer who came to us last year, a client who came to us last year, and basically something that they didn't understand was how their sort of what a good CAC was for them, so cost per acquiring a new customer, or generally speaking, cost per like a completed lead. They didn't understand what bidding strategy, for instance, should I use in my Google Ads account to understand success and how to measure success. So this client was very interesting. They had a software that so they were a SaaS business, so software as a service. And they had varying lifetime values of customers. They had they had 3 tiers of customers for 3 service plans. And basically what we set up in the back end was an automation that assigned a certain value to each inquiry, that if someone inquired, a certain number after they made an inquiry. And we were able, in different automations and APIs, to then update the conversion value of this person constantly as they stayed with the software. And once we actually understood the lifetime value and were able to quantify the lifetime value of all of these customers on all these various 3 plans, we were able to pump this data back into Google Ads and then actually see a direct return on investment of our ad campaigns. And as it turns out, this customer was freaking out about CPAs of about 50 to 100 euros. They were thinking, oh my God, we're spending far too much, right? But as it happens, through actually doing the conversion tracking properly and finding the ultimate macro conversion that we should optimize towards, and that was lifetime value, we figured out that the average lifetime value of each customer was 450 euros and counting, so much higher than they actually initially thought, which obviously changed the paradigm, right? So instead of freaking out about 50 to 100 euros for acquiring a customer, they realized, oh my God, that's insane. We can spend so much more than any other advertiser out there on acquiring a new customer, because we know that in the end, it'll pump back 450 euros minimum into the system long term. And this is a really, really important lesson as well for you guys, right? So if you measure the right conversions, it allows you to shift your mindset completely to how to make Google Ads work for you. You might think, oh my God, this is not working for me as a channel. But as it turns out, it was working all along, and you were actually able to spend a ton more money on acquiring customers. And in the end, that's what it's all about. If you can demonstrate that you can spend more or a sufficient amount of money to acquire a customer, and more than your competitors can, then you win at Google Ads. So you can see this was a massive success story. We basically used this conversion data to drive campaign optimization, to understand which keywords actually delivered long-term value, to understand which campaigns delivered results for our client, and we were able to scale them that way as well. And obviously it helps the algorithm as well, finding more high-value customers, because by what this client had, for instance, as well, just to elaborate further on that, when they were before just tracking inquiries, they were getting a lot of inquiries from private people. So by actually pumping data back of business people, so proper B2B leads, into the Google Ads cosmos, Google was able to optimize much more towards people who were more in their target audience, and as a result we've reduced ad wastage further. So that was really cool. So you can see how important it is sometimes to for e-commerce it can be quite simple purchases, but if you have a complex product or a complex sales cycle, even as an e-commerce business, you can sort of integrate other longer different conversions and different methods to get more value out of your ad campaigns and to understand how they perform. So where do I think conversion tracking is going to go in the future? So something that's going to be really interesting is going to be machine learning and automation. It's growing more and more. Obviously, Google Ads is already massively at the forefront, and Google is with automation and with machine learning. This is going nowhere. Actually, I think it's just going to increase in importance more and more. I am also going to be very interested in how tracking will sort of develop across multiple platforms and channels. Things are going to get more and more complicated in future regarding marketing. They've already become a lot more complicated in the past years. People discover brands via YouTube ads and then search for their brands later on Google, and then convert, or people might discover a brand on Meta, like on a different channel all in all, and then convert on Google Ads. And it's just going to get more and more complex and interesting in terms of customer journeys. And our job as digital marketers is to stay on top of these changes and customer behavior changes, and to develop further tools to understand the tracking across multiple platforms and channels. So this is something that I'm going to see very much growing in importance. We're already seeing a massive rise in the past year or two of tools such as Tracify, Klar, etc., Hyros, which are BI tools and helping us understand return on ad spend better, or return on investment better. And I think all of these tools will develop further to understand our understanding of to help our understanding of conversion tracking and the customer journey more as well. Now, I think something that's going to be really important, which Google's already started on, is privacy and how tracking methods will develop. Something that Google is already rolling out is enhanced conversions. So Google will actually start modeling data as well, because it won't get the full data from all of customers, for instance, if they don't accept cookies. So Google will be modeling data on how much revenue your campaign most likely has generated and what conversions it has generated. So that's going to be really interesting. So we'll have to try and lean into the guesswork a little bit and try and hold Google into check there. So I think that these are sort of the things where this is going to go to. So to sum it up, conversion tracking, hugely important, guys. Try to get this correct from the start. Wrong conversion tracking can mess up your ads account massively, can mess up your data. You won't understand what is actually working and what isn't working. You won't understand why if you make certain actions, why it won't bring the desired outcome. And also, very importantly, Google will not be able to deliver the results that you want if you don't track conversions correctly. So this is really important. I've already given you actionable steps how to set it up and how to optimize your tracking in Google Ads, and I think it is one of the most important levers that we have as digital advertisers compared to analog advertisers of the past who run TV ads or radio ads and stuff like that. And it's a tool that we should be using wisely and that we should be using extensively. So thank you very much for listening. If you need any help with this, feel free to reach out. Just visit younganddigitalmarketing.com or just pop on our Instagram or on our Facebook page, or send us a dove or a smoke signal, whatever's your favorite. And feel free to reach out and we'll be able to help you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Google Ads Unleashed. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. If you found value in today's podcast, please share it with others and leave a rating and a review. For more information or to connect with Jeremy, check him out online at www.younganddigital.marketing. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.